Welcome to Incredibly Ordinary, the podcast about ordinary people with incredible stories, hosted by Lance Billings, Josh Kilsch, and Nate Reynolds from Billings Group Financial Advisors. Well, hey, we got Carmen here. And so, okay, I'll let you do the introduction again, that we don't butcher the words.
So Carmen Schober, the novelist, essayist, and journalist now with Evie Magazine.
Yeah.
So I guess just starting with your life story, where you grew up, kind of how you got involved with the writing world and novels and
all
of it.
Take you way back. So I am originally from Indianapolis, but in my parents' families, my mom's side of the family is Cuban. My dad's side of the family, I joke, it's like redneck, but they all ended up in Indianapolis. And so my parents, left sort of home base to move to Manhattan, Kansas, for a very good job opportunity for my dad. He's in the financial advising world. And so I moved to Manhattan when I was like 12, and I liked it. 12 is like an age, I thought it was dramatic and not good or whatever, but very quickly liked Manhattan and made lots of friends, and honestly probably had a better experience than I would have growing up in downtown Indianapolis. It's just big, and I don't think I would have liked it. The average graduating class is massive, and so I just had a much more small town type of life, and love Manhattan. Still live here. It's a great place to have children. My parents still live here. My sister lives here and her family, so we love Manhattan. But yeah, let's see. I was always, well, I shouldn't say always. I got better at writing probably around middle school, and it was just always the subject that I felt like was the easiest and that I got the best grades in. So that was probably my clue that this is something you should consider in a serious way. But I don't know. I don't think I made the connection. I love to read books, and I think I thought it would be fun to be an author, but I didn't make this, some people are like, oh, I knew I was going to be an author and I wanted to be one. I was very I don't know what I'll be. Maybe I'll be a teacher. Maybe I'll be a journalist. I did think that. Maybe I'll be I was open to any number of things. And then what happened to me that really sort of sealed the trajectory was I was at K-State, I was open option, and I was taking all these English classes because I was good at it and I liked it. And I had an advisor very kindly one day sit me down and say, you've been open option for a while. If you just declared English, you could graduate next year. And that was 2 years, I think, for a bachelor's. And I was like, well, let's just do that. I don't really care. I will have an English degree. That's fine. So I was finishing up my English degree. And then I had another professor say, sometimes you give feedback in those classes. And she said, you give good feedback. Have you considered being a TA? Because if you go for your master's and you're a TA, your master's is free. And at the time, my husband was doing campus ministry. He was at K-State. And I was like, well, a free master's degree, you should probably do that.
Yeah.
When you're doing that, you have to pick a track. And one of the tracks was creative writing. And that was by far, to me, the most interesting of all of them. The other one was cultural studies. The other one was rhetoric. The other one was, they just did it. None of them were quite what I wanted to do. And I was like, creative writing is actually fun. So that is the early beginning of figuring out I should probably do writing in some capacity.
Yeah.
So your husband, is he from Manhattan then, or did he?
Yeah.
You guys met at K-State?
Yeah, similar to me. So he's actually from where he is at in Kansas. He would say he's from Overland Park, but he's lived in Manhattan how long? Since he's been in college, because he met me and then we got married and we stayed here. Was born in Alaska, lived in Ohio, settled in Overland Park.
Okay,
and then went to
cool.
K-State. Yeah.
Someone got there eventually. So.
Yeah, eventually ended up here.
And he was involved on on the campus ministries, you were saying?
Right. So when I met Jeff, he was studying architecture. It was his 5th year in a 5-year program. And he knew he didn't want to be an architect, but he'd already done the 4 years. And that's like one of the hardest programs at K-State. And he was like, I'm not going to start over. But he was leaning towards, he wanted to do ministry in some capacity. We met at a crew meeting. And so, yes, he finished his master's. We got married that summer. He started campus ministry, and I started my master's. Or maybe I did my last year of undergrad. I can't quite remember, but basically there were a couple years in there where we were both on campus, either doing ministry or learning.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
And so after your TA and getting your master's, is that kind of when you thought, hey, I want to look into becoming an author and writing books? Or how did that whole process come about then after college?
Yeah. So, an unfortunate thing about, I don't regret getting my master's or anything. I definitely learned a lot of important stuff. I think the experience teaching was really good, gave me some good like transferable skills, but most universities won't actually like teach you, if you do want to publish a book, you're not going to learn like that part of it. And so it just wasn't as much on my radar. At that moment, I kind of thought being a successful writer meant being published in literary magazines and maybe like doing more academia.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. And thankfully, just through various series of events, it occurred to me like that's not really what I want to do. Like those aren't really, like there's very good writing in literary magazines, but very few people read them. Like you're reaching like the tiniest possible population. You can win awards and stuff, but just when I was thinking through like, what if I am going to spend time writing, who do I want to read it? And in my mind, it was like, I want, as many possible people to read it. I don't really want it to be like limited to an academic type circle of people. So eventually, basically my time at the university came to an end. I had graduated. I was working there kind of as a tutor essentially, but then I got pregnant with our first baby. And so I was like, I'm gonna peace out, see how this goes. And in that little time frame of leaving the university, preparing to be a mom, I got back into reading the fiction that I really liked, which basically entailed Francine Rivers. Rachel, maybe you've read Francine Rivers. Just a wonderful, like probably one of the first authors to really take Christian fiction in a really important direction, which is outside of like this very sanitized bubble that sometimes Christian fiction can be.
Yeah.
And so I reread Francine Rivers and I was like, I would like to write something like this, like in the realm of what she's doing. And that is how that's how I started thinking about my first book.
That's one of the things that I would classify your books as, is that they are Christian books, but with real people who have real problems, not just like these very, you've got really hard problems. And it's very clean and it's very
style kind of.
It's very like, which is great sometimes, but sometimes like the cheese can go very far.
Yeah.
Whereas with like Francine Rivers or your books, it's you can say that it's real people having real struggles, and it's not a contrived struggle. Like, why would anybody be complaining about that? It's a real struggle.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for saying that. Sometimes in Christian fiction, there's just this unnecessary restriction put on how bad the problem can be. And I don't know why, because people have pretty bad problems, whether they're Christians or not. And the worse the problem, usually the better the story. And so, that's just something that I'm like, I don't necessarily, I've never really enjoyed the books that aren't, something bad has to be going on, like something pretty bad needs to be happening. Otherwise, even in a romance, because yes, I'm rooting for these people and I want them to get together and all of this, but like life is about more, it has to be this bigger thing at play. So that's kind of what I set out to do. And it was like pretty well received. Most of the reviews of After She Falls are overwhelmingly positive, and Pretty Little Pieces. But yeah, definitely too, because it is somewhat different for the Christian fiction genre. I have haters. I have some.
Did you go in always wanting to be like in the Christian author area, or like what was your like? Did you have a good idea of, hey, I'm gonna start writing, this is specifically the genre I want to be in?
You know, not really. I basically, oh, sorry, my dog is gonna, hey,
No,
stop.
that's fine.
Crazy dog.
And
She
if you gotta
almost
take
like
him,
knocked.
you gotta take her out, go ahead.
Yeah.
So,
Roxy, sit down, settle down.
or I guess for your first book, the After She Falls, I guess
Yeah.
where did the idea of that book come from? Like, how did you come up with that idea?
After She Falls is loosely based off of Rocky. So Rocky's my favorite movie. And I also, in the interim of leaving K-State and preparing to have Vivian, my daughter, I took a screenwriting class, like an online screenwriting class. And we had to write basically like a summary of a idea we would have for a script. And I just took Rocky. I just took Rocky and said, well, we'll just make it, 2018 right, or whatever it was. Female protagonist, mixed martial arts, make her Cuban rather than Italian, just change things up and make it fun. The Christian element came into play because I am a Christian, and it is very hard for me, like when I was in graduate school, it was always sort of like, keep that like out, like do not put that in. And I just got to a point as a writer, because I don't only write fiction, I write nonfiction as well, where I was like, I'm just not really interested in pretending like this doesn't exist. Like, I'm not interested in creating a world where this doesn't exist, because this does, and lots of people care about it, and lots of people talk about it. And like, so I just, even though it did limit my audience, and even though, some people think it's lame or whatever, I'm very much of the opinion that like it should be normalized because it's normal. And so I just kind of went into it like, I'm normal. I'm writing Christian fiction. It's normal. Like, you'll enjoy it. Like, it's fine. I don't know. Just, I didn't really get like hung up on it. And, really surprisingly, a very wide spectrum of people tend to like it. It seems like, whether they're Christian or not, whether they're like, my husband and I, we joke, like, there's like, your super Christian people who are like into all, and then you have like your more chill Christian people, like they're sincere and they love God, but they're not like, they don't have as many rules necessarily. And then you have like your people who, they're like, Christianity's like, meh, might be true. I'm kind of interested, and like, so that whole like range of people, I'm trying to get to like think about things and just give them an entertaining story that they'll enjoy.
So writing a book, then, do you have a background in boxing or any kind of mixed martial arts or anything, or?
Yes. So I watched Rocky when I was like 13. I don't know for sure. And my mom doesn't help me out. Like, she can't remember either. But I was young enough that I couldn't drive. Like, so I wasn't like 16. I was younger than that. We still lived in Indiana. So I would have been like 11 actually. Whoa. But I watched Rocky. And Rocky really is not like a movie that you're like 11-year-old would like. It's kind of slow. Like,
well, especially an 11-year-old little girl. Like, I can take a little, like, a 11-year-old boy, like, sure. But like, an
11-year-old little girl who, like, and I was not like athletic or anything, and I wasn't like, my family wasn't really athletic. I just liked it. I just was like, this movie speaks to my soul. And then we moved to Kansas, and I guess I just had a resurgence of it or something, because I was like, Mom, I want to do boxing. And I remember she was like, that's weird, because I was very academic. I was much more like, studying all the time and reading books and all of that. And so she was like, I guess that's fine. So she signed me up for boxing lessons when she had to drive me. So again, I was not 16. And that was really, I was not good at it. Like I said, I wasn't athletic at that time at all. I was a little bit overweight. Like there was just all these things about it that were like very painful and embarrassing. And it was just me, one other girl, and the coach who was like this college guy who, looking back, I'm like, I mean, he was a good coach, but he was very like unprofessional, like not in a bad way, but just like, it was just a weird situation. But I mean, that was the introduction, and boxing has always stuck with me. Like if I wasn't doing, I've done boxing on and off since then. If I'm not doing that, I'm doing some other kind of combatives. Kickboxing is what I currently do. I've done Krav Maga. I think that's how you say it. Everybody, Krav Maga. I don't know. But you know, the Israeli self-defense.
Right.
I like that. It's a little intense for me. I definitely kind of prefer stuff where I'm not like wrestling
on the ground rolling the entire time.
Yeah, or like people pretend to like stab you. I don't love that. Like I would just prefer we just like punch it out. Like that's more my personal preference. But yeah, and I love watching it. Like been to 4 UFC fights, watch it on TV. So
wow, okay.
Yeah.
So then that explains why After She Falls just kind of came about very organically. Then it seems like just So how did you go from that storyline, from writing your first book to working with Bethany House, your publisher? How did that whole process happen?
So that's a really interesting process. And again, you don't learn that like at school. Nobody like teaches you what to do.
No life skills.
No, like, I mean, I was a good writer. I knew how to write well, and that is like the half the battle. But yeah, how did I figure out what to do? Let me think. I knew I needed to get an agent, and I probably figured that out by looking online or something. And so I bought a book full of agents' names. It's this weird book you can buy that's like just literally a dictionary full of literary agents' names. And I tried that way for a while, and I was like, this is stupid. Like, this won't work. So then I went to a conference in Kansas City that had agents there. And I pitched to a woman who then became my agent. So advice to people who want to be writers is FaceTime with people with literary agents is probably much more valuable than you might realize. And I got very lucky in that, you know, the conference I went to, it worked out. A lot of writers go to lots of conferences and repeat this process many, many times. I didn't have to do that, thankfully. But that just entails you sit down with them, you usually have like 5 minutes, and you say, you know, here's the premise of my book. When I was pitching After She Falls, it was, you know, it's the female version of Rocky, and it's this second chance love story, and you know, all the fun things about it, basically. And then, you know, you're kind of selling yourself too. You have to be like, and I have, you know, I think at the time I had 3,000 email subscribers. You know, you have to like say the things about you that like show you can sell things, basically. And then from there, my literary agent sent that to, I think did we start with Bethany House? She did a mix of like the secular publishing groups and the Christian publishing groups, because my book could kind of go either way. So, you know, she sent it to Tyndale and Baker, which is what we ended up doing, but also like Penguin and the other ones. And then Bethany House wrote back pretty quickly and gave me a 2-book deal, which was very cool, although I only had 1 book. So that part was scary, because I mean, I couldn't really say no. I couldn't be like, no, I don't want your 2-book deal. But I also had 2 children and I was pregnant. So, yeah, that was cool.
Time to write another book.
That was good times. That was good times. My husband's like, let's never do that again. But we lived and we survived, and Pretty Little Pieces demolished After She Falls in terms of sales. And so it was good. It's good that I did it. Yeah. I don't know.
I've got that one here.
Oh, there it is. Yes,
I'm an avid Audible listener, so I had to wait for the books to come in. And I only got that one in time.
And that one, from what you were telling me, is a very different storyline, like not so much gritty and boxing, but kind of more.
It's still got the grit. It's
Does
just
it? Okay.
different. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very different world. I think you can tell the same person wrote them, hopefully.
Okay.
That's kind of what I was going for, is like, this is very different worlds. These are very different people, but the approach to the issues and the people is similar.
Yeah.
Pretty Little Pieces is about a for those like familiar with HGTV, like, you know, Fixer Upper, those types of shows. The premise is the woman is like this up and coming HGTV star, but then her life like falls apart and she has to rebuild. And so it's a little more like cutesy, but still very like, you know, like the guy she falls in love with is like this ex-sniper and he's got lots of baggage and issues. Like it's cutesy, but it's also like not cute. Some parts are like, whoa, you know,
Very
there's a lot going on.
much depth.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Right.
So you mentioned before you went to get the publisher, you had like 3,000 people on a subscriber email. Was that from like doing blogs and stuff like that? Or how did you even get that created before you went into writing?
Yeah. So I got very lucky because I did not do like book stuff. I wasn't in, like, some people, you know, they're on Bookstagram and they like review books and they build a platform that way. I built a platform through, basically blogging probably is the best way to describe it. Let me think of the simple way to break it down, because it is helpful if anybody wants to be a writer. This part is useful to think about. So in like 2018, I was blogging and I would just blog about whatever I wanted to blog about. My blog wasn't exclusively about writing or books or anything. It was like, I would do politics, I would do culture, I would do motherhood, like literally if it was interesting to me, I wrote about it and I didn't really care. Like some people tell you to like niche down. I was like, no, I won't. Because like, I mean, the thing about writing is like, to me, I have to be interested in it. That's the whole point. That's the fun of the job, is that like my job is to write down things that you want to read. And so I have to want to read it, I think. So I wrote a blog about some crazy political stuff going on at the time. I don't even have to pinpoint it for you because I mean, there's just so much of it, like some crazy political situation. I wrote about that, and my friend from college reached out to me and he was like, Carmen, this is really good. You know, we should like write together. And I was like, oh, that's cool. You know, I mean, this pretty new thing. And he was like, yeah, I have this Facebook group and we could write and then post the stuff to the group. Well, the group had 30,000 people in it. Oh, wow. And he'd just been building that group since college, and it was called Libertarian Christian. And so it was just a very cool group of people who were, you know, interested in Christianity and also interested in issues of politics and culture. So we could write about a lot and they were interested in it. So that was like my first like, you know, audience. Beyond just like my friends. And then from there, we would write together and then we would get invited to do things. Like I got invited to be on like a podcast in Seattle, random, like just, you know, whatever I happened to be writing about, people would like find it and they'd be like, and so I just would slowly over time accrue more and more people interested in my writing through that. And then I also, super lucky situation. I mean, lucky is not the right word, super like providential. I started taking a course. It's called Tim Grail's book launch course. And he really emphasizes how you build an email list. And I never really thought about that before. I just thought like, oh, I'm supposed to get lots of followers. But Tim Grail was like, no, you need to funnel them to an email list because you own that list. And it's much easier to sell things to people on an email list than it is on your social media. So very early on, before I even had a book, I was thinking about this, and that helped so much. And so I created basically a shopping guide for how to shop your values as a Christian. So let's say you don't want to go. You remember that? Yeah. That thing got me like thousands of followers, like the most random. And some of those are like my original, like they're still on my email list, like, you know, like, and so I just was playing around with this idea of what can I deliver to my audience that I think they'll find valuable. And like that one happened to be this thing. And so, yeah, when I went to go pitch my books, I had a lot of email subscribers because of that, not because of any. And, it was a somewhat easy pivot to be like, you want to support Christians and you want to support small businesses, you want to support these kinds of things. So why don't you support me? That was sort of my pitch. Yeah. So that was how I did that.
Man. So now, family, kids, are you going to be writing any more books, or is that kind of phase of life past for a little while? Because now you're doing a lot of like interviews and articles for like magazines and stuff like that, right?
Yes. So yeah, I kind of stumbled into that too. So I will definitely write more fiction, and whether it is books or scripts kind of remains to be seen. Probably both, realistically. What I think my ideal situation would be for this, I've been working on a book series. It's definitely slow going. It's very different than my novels in that it's a family drama about the Cuban mafia. So it's much more complex. There's a lot more people, and
because your background is you're part Cuban, is that right?
Yes, my mom is Cuban. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and the mafia is just always a hot topic. People love that. Like, it never ceases to be interesting. I think my theory is because it's like the closest thing we have in modernity to a kingdom. Like people are interested in kingdoms and that kind of thing. We don't really have that anymore, but the mafia essentially functions in like a corrupt way, like a kingdom. So I digress. Basically, I think that's a concept that I can sell. And so that's the one that I'm interested in. And obviously being Cuban, having Cuban relatives and funny stories. As far as I know, none of them are in the mafia, but I wouldn't be like shocked if I found out. I do know, like, I think on my dad's side, there's like a pirate. I don't know. There's interesting things, I have a cousin who's very into like genealogies and stuff. And she's like, yeah, we're related to this pirate. It's probably true. But yes, so I work on that little by little, but I did fall into this great opportunity with Evie Magazine, which has allowed me to interview very high profile people. That's a lot, and then that gets other magazines to ask me to interview people, which pays really well. And now I've got people wanting me to ghostwrite for them, which that just means like I write it and then they get to say like they wrote it. And people pay a lot for that. And so basically where I'm at is, I always love fiction and I want to write it, but I'm getting paid very well to write nonfiction, and my audience is growing. It's much easier to grow an audience when you're working with multiple parties versus just your little self and your lead magnets, your shopping guides, whatever. So yeah. It's kind of, I think my goal, I would love to have book 1 of the series done. And I don't know if that means like out in the world, but like done in my mind by the end of 2025.
Is that kind of, okay, so when you're looking at writing a book, do you go into it with a time frame of, I'm going to start this with this end date, I want to get it out by? Or is it kind of, we'll just keep it going with life, and whenever it finishes, it finishes?
So the second one is my approach. I like I said, when I signed up with Bethany House, which I love them, they were great to work with, but I didn't even know that a book a year was a thing. Like when they were like, we want the second book in less than a year, I was like, people do that? Like you have writers.
So that's in the contract, and it's like you have to have this done by this time frame.
Right. So if you sign a contract, and there's like, I was pregnant, and like when they got the revisions back to me, I was literally getting ready to go into labor. And so like there are things that are like, negotiable, especially with a Christian publisher. Like they're very, they were like, have your baby and like don't talk to us until you're whatever. But no, most authors, if they did what I did, they would keep churning out like a book a year. That's pretty normal. But yeah, with me and my stage of life and just the kind of the way that I think, everything I write in terms of fiction is generally pretty different. Like, you know, like I don't really want to do, like, people will ask me if I'll write like an After She Falls 2 or a Pretty Little Pieces 2. That sounds kind of like torture to me. Like, not like, like, you know, I guess it sounds, I don't know. It's just when I'm done with a thing, I'm very like done. And so the idea of trying to keep thinking of contemporary Christian romance that kind of all sound the same, I was just like, I just don't think I want to do that. And then the opportunity with Evie came. And I mean, yeah, if I'm just being very honest with potentially people who want to be writers, you can make a lot more money writing for organizations and publications and other people than you can publishing books. I mean, you can make a living publishing books, but you're going to work a lot harder. You're going to work a lot harder. And you're like on that constant promotional grind, which if I was in a different stage of life, maybe I'd be fine with that. But I was like, after 2 book launches back to back, I was like, I don't need to do this every year. I'll be okay. I'll be fine. And I hope, you know, I have, obviously it's sad when I have readers that are like, oh, I really want, and I'm like, I know, I wish I could just like instantly like give it to you. But hopefully that will make the next one worth the wait. It will be extra special.
I'm a big Jack Carr fan. I was listening to him talk about how he writes his books and like and I was just like, that sounds tiring. like the process and that, and just like
and you can't like force it sometimes. Like this Mafia one, I have been working on this for a long time, and that could be frustrating, but as I think through it, I'm like, the story's gotten better and better because I've you know, done this. Like I've written lots of iterations of it. I've written stuff that I'm never going to use, but like the fact that I'm giving myself time, and I'm, you know, letting my brain make more connections. And I've learned things, honestly. I mean, I've learned stuff about my family and stuff about life since I first got the idea. And I think that if I had like forced myself to just like write it, it wouldn't be as good as it will be. So there's something to be said for that.
Will you self-publish that one then?
You know, I will definitely try getting it traditionally published. I don't think the Christian market, maybe by the time it's ready, the Christian market is expanding. So it's possible it could find a good home. The general market, I'm open to that too. The only problem I see in that is sometimes the general market is very not friendly to Christian authors, and not even because the book would be Christian, it would just be me, like having to market me. They might be sort of like, I have author friends who are in the general market, and just some of the things they tell me, I'm like, that sounds like a headache, and I'm not sure that it would be worth it. And ideally, if my email list numbers stay strong by the end of 2025, if I did want to self-publish that, I could honestly probably sell more than I would in maybe, you know, depending on what kind of, I mean, if somebody made me an offer I couldn't refuse, I would for sure do it. Like I don't need that much control. But you know, there are just lots of things you want to consider when you're doing a book deal. And one thing for me is always like, whoever I partner with has to have my back. Like if people come and start complaining about me because I'm Christian or I write for Evie or whatever, and you're a publisher and you're going to be like, oh no, like we should just not waste each other's time. Like, you know, we need to like on the front end, be excited about me and what I do and know who my audience is, and then go from there.
Cool.
So then how did the transition happen to Evie Magazine?
Yeah, so with Evie, it's actually funny. I applied to work at Evie like years ago, which I don't know why. I had enough going on, but we're just very their target audience is my target audience, like exactly the same, right? They're going for that woman who is interested in deeper issues, but also likes like entertainment and fun and
stuff,
humor, and like, you know, just like being a woman. Like it's like the serious part and the not serious parts. Like that's when you get online and you want to consume media, that's what I want. I don't want it all to be degenerate, and I don't want it all to be ridiculous, but it doesn't all have to be like serious and theological at all times. And Evie was doing that thing. And so I was like, it would be strategic for me to get in on this. And they probably picked up that I had too much going on, because they were like, not now. And I was like, all right. But then after Pretty Little Pieces came out, I'd been working on my Mafia series. It was very slow going. And I was kind of thinking through, like, do I want to stay on the hamster wheel of publishing a book every year? Like I was kind of like feeling the pressure, basically, of like, do it or don't do it. What are you going to do? And I mean, I'm sure it was probably from God. I was like, I'll just email Evie and be like, hey, don't know if you remember me. What's up? I'm a published author now. I applied before my books were out, and I said, I would love to write something for you if you're interested. It would just be an essay about how progressive politics have ruined good storytelling. And they were very interested in that. And then that ended up performing well. And I was going to ask them if they wanted me to write something else, but they reached out to me first. And they were like, would you join our contributor team? And I was like, oh, sure. I pretended like I was, I guess so.
No big deal.
Then, and so then I was a weekly contributor, and I was kind of thinking like it would be cool if this was more official. And then they reached out and offered me the news writing job, which at the time I didn't know would include interviews, but then ended up having the interviews as well, which are really fun.
Yeah.
So.
And you've done some pretty big ones, like Nick Freitas was a really cool one.
That was one of our favorites.
Yeah.
I love him.
He reached out to you a while back to be on the podcast, and then I saw that you were interviewing Nick Freitas. I was like, oh gosh, she's got Nick Freitas.
No time for us.
That's so cool. Oh my gosh, Nick Freitas is the thing that's like amazing about him is everything he says sounds like, if I were going to sound that good, I would have to practice so many times.
Right.
Like if I was going to deliver that much wisdom eloquently, y'all, I would be like, okay, I got to practice what I'm going to say. And he doesn't like, I sent him a Google Doc with the questions before. I know he didn't even look at it. He didn't even look. And like I was like, you just sound like so smart.
Right.
Yeah.
But also
so
like he's not
easy to understand.
Yes.
We're big Nick Freitas fans, and so that was cool seeing. And then you also did Jordan Peterson's daughter too, right? Yes. Mikhaila, is that
Mikhaila Peterson?
Yeah.
Yes, Mikhaila. Yes, she was very, very interesting to talk to, and just became a Christian, so that was cool.
Oh,
she had
really? Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I know. I was joking with my friend. I said, Jordan Peterson, surrounded by Christians.
I know.
It's time, man. You can't fight it.
I saw the John Rich interview with him, with Jordan, where John's just like pushing him, like, why don't you? Yeah, it was interesting. But
well, and
well,
go ahead.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it was interesting to watch Elon Musk and Jordan Peterson talk, because I felt like Jordan Peterson was kind of like pushing Elon Musk to be a Christian. I was like, wait, are you a Christian? Are you just not going to tell anybody? We're just going to
Jordan was on Sean Ryan's podcast too. And we listen to Sean Ryan. I'm not sure if you know who he is or not.
I think I do know who that is.
And Sean was like, one question you don't like being asked is, do you believe in God? And he's like, can you explain why? And I was just like, man, this guy's so close to all of it, but it's just,
Yeah.
But, well, I asked Mikhaila about that, because Mikhaila basically had said previously that she had the same approach. Like, she had the same sort of psychological approach to Christianity. She thought it was good. She thought it was true in a way, but not like the Orthodox way, right? Where you actually fundamentally recognize Jesus as God. Like, she hadn't gotten to that point. And, so I said, it sounds like it's changed for you. What changed for you? And it wasn't like this sort of like crazy thing. Basically, she married a man who's a Christian, and she admired many things about him and was doing what he did. She read the Bible, she prayed. But she said basically one day she was like very just like aware of spiritual things in a way that she'd never been before, both like her own sin and also the sense of being saved. And so that interview is really interesting if anyone wants to go kind of get a sense of, and she's very smart, just like her dad. And so the way she talks about things, you're like, huh, but also very accessible and cool and down to earth. And she's been through some things. She's definitely like on the glow up. She's on the rise, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. So very cool to see that right now.
Yeah.
So with those ones, then did you reach out to them, or was that all set up through like these magazines for you to interview them for their articles and stuff?
Yeah, so sometimes people reach out to Evie, and usually those work out. We'll do those. But yeah, sometimes internally as a team, if we just see something interesting, we'll be like, we should try to get that person for the magazine. And then it definitely helps. So I can send DMs and get certain people, but it's good when it's coming from an account with like, hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah.
Like, that is more incentivizing.
So who has been one of your favorite interviews to date?
Man, lots of good ones. Let's see. Favorite. Well, so these haven't come out yet. I think I can talk about them. Yeah, I can. So these actually weren't for Evie. Hopefully they will be, because they're very transferable. But because of my work for Evie, this magazine reached out to me. It's called Beach Happy Magazine. And through them, I got to interview Sadie Robertson from Duck Dynasty and her husband, Christian. They were so cute. Oh my gosh, so cute. And then I also got to interview Daisy Kent from The Bachelor, the most recent season from The Bachelor, the gal with the cochlear implant. And she was wonderful to talk to. And they both, we talked about faith a lot, like for both of those people, like both sets of those interviews. And the funnest thing, honestly, I think about that part of the job is like the screen effect has us oftentimes thinking that like these people are so different than us. Right. Like they're so, like somehow they're different. Like they're fundamentally different than us. And like they're not. They're really just like a normal person, but they happen to have a job that involves like a public facing persona. And it's interesting to talk about that, but it is cool. It kind of breaks down the sort of insecurity you can have, I think. I mean, I don't know. As somebody who's has been trying to build a career for years, like the effort and all of that, like to just see on the other side of it, like even these people with these really big platforms and all these different things, they're fundamentally there's people like they just do what we do. Like they're wearing sweatpants and they, like have things to do, like like it's like the same like thing. And so that has just been cool to break down sort of the mystique of celebrity culture and meet these very cool down to earth people.
And then recently too, I saw that, or you showed it to me, Gina, I can't pronounce her last name.
Carano.
She like reposted something that you said or that you did, or
Yeah, she did. That was cool. Big Gina Carano fan. She was like the original female MMA star. And like beautiful and like just this great like archetype of the female MMA star. And then obviously she's had this crazy situation with Disney where she basically got fired for, like when you really look at what she got fired for, it was like for drawing a comparison between two things. Like, and not even like in a really explicit way. Like it's like, so yes, for Evie, I am kind of now I'm sort of the go-to, like if any new developments happen in that case, I write about them. And she reshared my coverage. And so
that's really cool. That's really cool.
And like hopefully one day maybe she'll read After She Falls, because I think she would really like it and resonate with it. And that's the goal, hopefully. And she was an Evie cover girl. So like I'm 1 degree away, right?
Yeah,
like,
there you go.
There. Yeah.
Cool. So do you do stuff on current events too? You were saying like political wise or just culture wise? Is that for Evie also you do?
Yeah, primarily for Evie. Occasionally I'll go rogue and blog personally again, but at this point it makes a lot more sense to get paid for it. So if I'm gonna do like a media a thing relating to culture, typically would have Evie do it, just because too, I mean, they can reach so many, many more people.
Cool.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I mean, for Evie, I do all things. I am a news writer, so I cover what's trending. I do the most politics probably right now consistently for Evie. I also do health and beauty and wellness because, like I said, I'm just a girl. I like all the things. I like theology, politics, philosophy. I like all of that stuff, but I also want to know what are the nail trends for 2025. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
So with, I mean, kind of hearing like your background with your faith and then even kind of the interviews you've had with people, seems like you're more conservative in your views and stuff. Is your family that way? Did you kind of grow up in that environment, or did you find that yourself growing up, whether it's Christianity or even with your politics too?
You know, my family was very normal. Like we did not, I wouldn't say like, I mean, we went to church sometimes consistently. My dad watched the news a lot, so it was always kind of a thing. But some people like it's very important, like it's important that your family teaches you about that stuff. It wasn't necessarily that way in my family. It was more kind of like just observed. And then for me, really what like gave me my own strong convictions is that when I was like 12, I definitely had a very profound spiritual experience where I just sensed on a level that like I couldn't rationalize away like God's presence. And that really pushed me to learn about like, well, I know God is real, so I need to know what he's like. And so that spurred me on into learning about Christianity. And then from there, other religions as well. But I was pretty sure Christianity was right. Obviously that was the framework I had the most to work with. And then from there, learning more about like natural religion and how do the other religions compare and contradict. And the more I did that, the more convinced I became that this is true. And then obviously I met my husband who he had read, so he wasn't a Christian actually, and he grew up in a family that I would say was more disciplined about it, but Jeff just didn't really feel strongly about it, I guess is the best way to put it. But he read Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis in college, and he didn't even actually he was like, basically how he describes it, he's like, I was pretty convinced it was true, but not totally. So I just said, I'll just try and believe it's true and see what happens. And then it was like, I mean, I didn't know him before he was a Christian, but how he describes it to me is basically like, he's like, you wouldn't even really like recognize, like you wouldn't, I'm so different, like I'm just fundamentally different in how I think and act and like what I want. And it's like it was that profound of a transformation for him. Yeah. And so then when we met, he had this really strong interest in doing ministry. I obviously was doing writing. And so it just kind of made sense. Like I do view elements of my writing as a ministry of trying. I mean, I don't think I'm going to get anybody to become a Christian because they read something I wrote, but I at least want to inspire them to think like people have been interested in this for thousands of years. It's a very recent modern thing for religion to be like relegated as this weird thing or this bad thing or this, thing that you don't need to care about. Like literally human civilization has wondered about this and asked questions about it and pursued answers. And so at the very least, I just hope that my writing gets that little permission in someone. Like I know that not everybody thinks it's cool and lots of people have issues with it, whatever. But if you're wondering what God is like, it's important for you to go figure it out. Is kind of my approach to things. Hopefully that answered your question.
No, yeah, definitely.
Went in many places. Yeah.
Yeah. And so does your husband still do ministry today?
He does. Yep, he does. We call it church in the park. It's not really a church because we don't, it's like the only thing that we do is get together and eat lunch, and he teaches like a little lesson from the Bible. So it's more like Bible
Okay.
study.
Yeah.
But we found that it's been really good because the people that tend to like it are people who are genuinely really interested in learning more about God, but they are hesitant to join like a traditional church,
Mhm.
right? Like they've done that and maybe it didn't work out, or they just don't really know enough about it to feel like, they could do that. And so it's a good sort of like, this is really what Christianity is about. And it's important to find a community and join a community, but like more so, it's important for you to understand your relationship to Christianity before you do that. And so sort of
Yeah.
just getting, sort of like ground level, like when because sometimes two people approach the Bible, and if you haven't actually studied the Bible and you don't have any sort of like third party stuff to help you, you're kind of going to be like, what the heck is going on? Like, I don't know, like who are these people, and like what time? And so we're kind of doing that. It's like, let's situate Christianity in real life because it happened in real life. Like,
right.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So is that something y'all do then every like Sunday or every week?
Almost every Sunday. Yep.
Okay.
Almost every
Cool.
Sunday. And then, Jeff leads a lot of men's groups. Like, he's still very passionate about ministry. I mean, his career is like taking off. I mean, people always want to interview me, but Jeff is honestly the more interesting person. He's in his financial advising career, like he's been hard at work for 10 years in that, and cool things are happening, but his heart is definitely still for ministry.
So he's a financial advisor also?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We are too. So
cool. Oh, you are too?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
You should
awesome.
have him on. You should have him on sometime. He would be fun to talk to.
How long has he been doing that for?
Let's see. How long?
Does he work with your dad? Since your
He
dad
did, yes. So well, I guess he still technically does. So this is a cool thing that happened with my dad.
That's us too. I work for her dad, my father-in-law.
Oh, you do? Oh my gosh, how funny. That is crazy. Well, my dad always really wanted me to work with him, but my dad and I are very similar, and I was like, we would not get along. Plus, I'm not a numbers person. Like I'm a words person. I'm not a numbers person. And so, and this job is lots of numbers and like acronyms and stuff. And Jeff and my dad get along so good. Like it just works so well. But my dad actually had his own, what do you call it? Basically, it was like an agency, and he would help businesses throughout Kansas with their benefits. And he actually sold it to a corporation right before COVID. So he evaded that whole mess of figuring out, because he primarily services hospitals. That was his life. So it was a whole thing. And ended up being really good. So now Jeff has the experience of working in the small agency, but also for like a corporate agency. And he's great at it. I mean, I could never. It was good. God knew. He was like, not Carmen, but we'll find the guy. We'll find the guy to do it.
That's awesome. That's hilarious.
So
yeah, that is funny. It doesn't happen that often. It's great when it does. I mean, that's like the dream. When I think about my children, I mean, I hope they marry people who want to be like involved. Obviously, they can do their own thing and stuff, but it's cool if it works out. If you can work together, I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, hey, this has been awesome. We appreciate you agreeing to do this with us. It's been a lot of fun.
Heck yeah.
And so if people want to find you, get your books or your social media or your email list, where do they go to get a hold of you?
So definitely, if you're going to do anything, sign up for my email list. That's the best. CarmenSchober.com. So very straightforward. My books are available anywhere, but easiest place to probably get them is Amazon. Or you can ask your library to get a copy. That's always great, because then more people can read them. What else? Social media, I'm definitely, unfortunately, very tied to Instagram. It's not the hot platform anymore, but I kind of hate TikTok. I'm on Twitter. Basically, if you search Carmen Schober, I should pop up, and it's SCHOBER. Tricks people up, but yes, you should be able to find me. I'm out there. There's enough of my writing somewhere in the pocket of the internet. You'll
Awesome.
find me. But thank you guys so much for having me. This is awesome that you do this, and it's been a pleasure.
Yeah,
All right.
thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Incredibly Ordinary. If you want to hear more stories like the one you heard today, be sure to click the follow button so you can be notified when new episodes become available. For more information about today's episode, or if you have an amazing story to share, or want to feature your business on Incredibly Ordinary podcast, then we want to hear from you. Find our contact details in today's show notes and get in touch. Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analysis of Billings Group. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, Private Client Services, their clients, or their employees. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by Billings Group, or RFG Advisory, or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Securities offered by registered representatives of Private Client Services, member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, a registered investment advisor. Private Client Services, Billings Group, and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.